Hey everyone, ready to dive deep into the world of rhodiola. We're going to tackle this trending supplement head on, figure out if it actually lives up to all the hype. So, are you prepping for a big presentation? Or maybe just curious about this so-called natural wonder? Whatever brought you here, buckle up because we're going straight to the source. Today, we've got an awesome overview from the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health, the NCCIH.
Yeah, you can think of them as the mythbusters of natural health.
Exactly. And our mission today is simple. We're cutting through the noise. We're separating fact from fiction to uncover what science actually says about rhodiola's benefits and risks.
Yeah, you know what's really fascinating about rhodiola?
What's that?
Well, way before it hit the modern wellness scene, it was already a star player in traditional medicine, especially in Europe and Asia.
Really?
Oh yeah, we're talking centuries of use here.
Wow, so like way before influencers were even a thing.
Exactly.
It's like I can just picture Vikings downing rhodiola for a boost before a raid.
Well, maybe not Vikings specifically,
Right.
but think about harsh Siberian landscapes, high-altitude climbs in the Himalayas.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Those were the real proving grounds for rhodiola.
So this golden root has some serious old school cred.
Absolutely. It was traditionally used to enhance endurance, boost work performance, and even help people adapt to those extreme high altitudes.
So it's not just some trendy fad, it's got a legitimate history. But then we fast forward to today, and suddenly rhodiola is everywhere. It's like you can't escape it.
Right.
Every ad promises it'll boost energy, sharpen focus, enhance athletic performance, manage stress. I mean, even tackle depression and anxiety. It's almost like it's become the ultimate cure-all wonder supplement. Is that even realistic?
Well, that's where things get a little more complicated. You see, modern marketing has definitely taken those traditional uses and, let's just say, amplified them. And while there are some promising early findings, the NCCIH report really stresses a key point.
What's that?
Rigorous scientific research on rhodiola's effects in humans is still surprisingly limited.
So we're in that classic more research is needed zone. I know, can be a bit frustrating when you're trying to make informed decisions about your health, right?
Right.
But you know what? I also see it as an opportunity. It's a chance to really dig into what we don't know and understand why that research gap even exists.
Yeah, and it's not that unusual, especially with complex natural compounds, substances that have been used for centuries in so many different ways.
Right, right.
Studying something like rhodiola isn't as simple as testing a single isolated chemical in a lab.
Oh, I see. It's more complex than that.
Much more. Researchers have to consider variations in plant species, growing conditions, extraction methods, dosage, individual responses. It's like a giant, multifaceted puzzle.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So before we go full-on science nerd here, let's address the big question. Safety.
Yeah.
Is rhodiola something people can generally take without, worrying about side effects?
Well, at least based on what we've got so far. The available studies suggest rhodiola appears to be safe for most people when used short-term, typically up to 12 weeks.
Okay, so no sudden transformations or anything? That's good to know. But I'm guessing there are still potential side effects we should be aware of, right?
Absolutely. Even natural substances can have side effects, remember?
Oh, yeah, of course.
With rhodiola, the most commonly reported ones seem to be pretty mild. Things like dizziness, dry mouth, or even, get this, excessive saliva production.
Wait, excessive saliva, that's kind of the opposite of dry mouth, isn't it?
It is. And it shows that even seemingly minor side effects can be a big deal for some people.
Totally. I'm also thinking about, more serious concerns. Is rhodiola safe for everyone? Or are there certain groups who should maybe steer clear?
That's such a crucial question, and it really highlights a big knowledge gap we have. We still know very little about rhodiola's safety during pregnancy or breastfeeding.
Oh, wow.
So in those situations, caution is absolutely key.
Yeah, definitely. 1,000 times yes. If you're pregnant, breastfeeding, or have any health concerns at all, please talk to your doctor before taking rhodiola or any other supplement for that matter.
Couldn't agree more. It's always best to err on the side of caution. Get personalized advice from a medical professional, especially when it comes to supplements. They can interact with medications or pre-existing conditions in ways we might not fully understand yet.
Okay, so just to recap, rhodiola's got a long history of use, seems generally safe short-term for most people, but caution is definitely needed in certain situations. And a big point here, there's still a lot we don't know about its effectiveness for all those specific health claims we hear about. Okay, so now let's dive into those claims. Let's see what the science actually reveals.
Sounds good. Okay, so let's get into some of the research, keeping in mind, of course, that the studies we have are limited. But they do give us some interesting insights into rhodiola's potential,
Yeah, definitely. Where should we start? Maybe with one of the claims that seems to pop up everywhere, stress and fatigue.
Yeah, that's a good place to begin. Several studies have looked at whether rhodiola can actually help people cope with stress, particularly mental fatigue and burnout. Those feelings.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, who couldn't use a little help with stress these days, right?
Right.
So what have researchers found?
Well, the results have been a bit mixed, to be honest. Some small studies suggest that rhodiola might actually have a positive impact.
Okay.
For instance, there's this one study on nursing students, a group known for, well, facing pretty high stress levels.
Yeah, definitely a demanding field.
Right, so they took rhodiola extract daily for 4 weeks. And compared to those taking a placebo, they reported feeling less mentally and physically exhausted.
Interesting. So any relief from burnout would be a big win for them. I'm curious about, what kind of evidence we're talking about here. Are these studies based on like subjective experiences, how stressed someone says they feel, or are there more objective measures involved?
That's a great question, and it really gets at how we evaluate scientific research in general. So in that nursing student study, for example, they used standardized questionnaires to assess stress and fatigue levels. Now, while those are subjective reports, the questionnaires are designed to capture changes in specific symptoms over time. So that makes the data more reliable, you see.
Right, right.
And they also incorporated some objective measures, like heart rate variability, which can actually reflect the body's stress response.
Okay, so it's not just based on like feelings, there are actual physiological indicators being measured too. But you mentioned the research on rhodiola's effects on stress and fatigue has been mixed.
Yeah.
So what about the studies that haven't found clear benefits? What are some of the limitations or inconsistencies we need to keep in mind?
One common thread in some of those less conclusive studies is small sample size, which can make it hard to generalize the findings to a wider population.
That makes sense.
Another factor is the variability in the rhodiola extracts used. Different preparations can have varying levels of active compounds, which could definitely influence the results.
Oh, I see. So it's not as simple as saying rhodiola reduces stress. There's more nuance to it.
Right.
The type of extract, the dosage, individual factors all seem to play a role.
Absolutely.
It makes me think of those personalized vitamin recommendations you see now. Maybe in the future, we'll have personalized rhodiola recommendations based on individual needs and even genetic factors.
That's a really interesting thought.
Yeah.
It speaks to the growing field of personalized medicine, and the idea that one-size-fits-all approaches aren't always the best way to go.
Yeah, for sure.
But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's shift gears to another area where rhodiola has gotten a lot of attention. Its potential benefits for mood, particularly in managing depression and anxiety.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely something I think a lot of people are curious about. What does the research say about rhodiola's potential as a mood booster?
Well, some small studies have looked into rhodiola's potential as an antidepressant, and a few have actually shown some positive results, at least in the short term. Yeah. For example, one study found that people with mild to moderate depression who took rhodiola extract daily for 6 weeks saw significant improvements in their symptoms compared to those taking a placebo.
Oh, wow.
What's particularly interesting is that some researchers believe rhodiola might work, in part, by influencing the balance of certain neurotransmitters in the brain, like serotonin and dopamine, which are involved in mood regulation.
So it's not just about feeling better subjectively. It could actually be impacting the brain's chemistry.
Yeah, potentially.
It makes me wonder if rhodiola could be used alongside traditional antidepressants or even as an alternative for people who can't tolerate those medications.
Those are really important questions. But it's absolutely crucial to emphasize that we need much more research before we can draw any firm conclusions.
Right.
The NCCIH is very clear on this. We simply don't have enough evidence yet to determine whether rhodiola is a safe or effective treatment for depression or anxiety. And it's definitely not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment.
Okay, absolutely. That's important to remember. We don't want to give anyone false hope or encourage them to self-treat serious conditions. This is about empowering people with knowledge so they can make informed decisions with their healthcare provider.
Exactly. It's about adding to the conversation, not making sweeping claims or replacing established medical treatments. Speaking of expanding the conversation, let's move on to an area that I know a lot of listeners are interested in: rhodiola's potential to boost athletic performance.
Okay, yeah, no, this is where things get really interesting. We've all heard those stories about ancient herbs and remedies giving athletes an edge. So what's the reality with rhodiola? Can it actually help you run faster, lift heavier, or just power through those tough workouts?
You've hit on a topic that has fascinated people for centuries: the search for that extra edge in athletic performance.
Right.
And while rhodiola might not be the magic bullet some are hoping for, there are some interesting studies suggesting it could offer certain benefits, particularly when it comes to endurance and fatigue resistance.
Okay, so give us the details. What kind of performance boosts are we talking about?
Well, for example, one study looked at endurance cycling performance, and they found that those taking rhodiola extract before a time trial were able to cycle for a slightly longer duration than those taking a placebo.
Hmm.
Another study indicated that rhodiola might actually reduce perceived exertion during exercise.
Interesting. So maybe not superhuman strength, but the ability to push a little harder or feel less exhausted during a workout.
Right.
That could be a real advantage for athletes, especially those focused on endurance sports. But you said the effects observed have been relatively modest. What are some of the limitations of the research in this area?
Well, one challenge is that many studies have focused on specific types of exercise, like cycling or running. So we need more research to understand how rhodiola might affect performance in other activities, like weightlifting or team sports, for instance.
All right. Makes sense.
Additionally, the dosages used in studies vary quite a bit, and it's not yet clear what the optimal dosage might be for different individuals and athletic goals.
So it sounds like there's potential there. But we need more research to really nail down how rhodiola can be best used for athletic performance. It also makes me wonder how rhodiola might interact with other supplements or training regimens. Is it something athletes could safely incorporate into their existing routines?
That's a great question, and it really highlights the need for personalized guidance,
Hmm.
especially for athletes who are often pushing their bodies to the limits.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so important to consult with a qualified sports medicine professional or a registered dietitian who specializes in sports nutrition to make sure that rhodiola, or any supplement for that matter, is appropriate for their individual needs and training goals.
Yeah, that's such an important reminder. It's not just about what the research says in general. It's about applying that knowledge responsibly and understanding that what works for one person might not work for another. All right, welcome back for the final stretch of our rhodiola deep dive. We've covered a lot, from ancient uses to modern hype, but there's one more area I'm really excited to explore. Rhodiola's potential cognitive benefits. Can this ancient root actually make us sharper, boost focus, maybe even give us a memory upgrade?
The quest for cognitive enhancement. Something that's fascinated humans forever, really.
Yeah, definitely.
And while rhodiola might not be the brain-boosting miracle some are hoping for, there are some really interesting findings that suggest it could offer certain cognitive benefits, especially in situations involving mental fatigue.
Okay, so maybe not a magic pill for instant genius, but something that could help us stay sharp, focused, and maybe even fight off brain fog? I'm in. What kind of evidence are we talking about here?
Well, some studies have focused specifically on people dealing with mental fatigue or even cognitive decline. And a few of these studies suggest that rhodiola might help improve attention and reduce those feelings of mental exhaustion.
That makes sense. Given what we've learned about rhodiola's potential to combat physical fatigue and stress, it makes me wonder if there's a connection there. Are there similar mechanisms at play in both the body and the brain?
That's a great question, and it's one that researchers are still trying to figure out. There's a growing body of evidence suggesting a strong link between physical and mental well-being.
Yeah, for sure.
It's possible that rhodiola's adaptogenic properties, that ability to help the body cope with stress, could also extend to the brain, making it more resilient to mental strain.
Okay, so let's get into the specifics of these studies. What kind of cognitive improvements have researchers actually observed?
Well, there's this one study, for instance, that involved physicians working night shifts, a scenario where mental fatigue is a huge concern, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And the study found that those who took rhodiola extract for 2 weeks performed better on tests measuring mental fatigue and attention compared to those who took a placebo. They were able to stay alert and focused for longer periods, which is crucial in a demanding job like that.
That's pretty impressive. Makes you wonder if rhodiola can be helpful for anyone who struggles with focus or mental fatigue, not just those working night shifts. Are there other studies that kind of back up these findings?
Yeah, there have been a few other small studies suggesting that rhodiola might have some positive effects on cognitive function, particularly when it comes to reducing mental fatigue, improving attention, and maybe even boosting memory in certain situations.
It's exciting to see this research emerging, but as always, I'm curious about the limitations. What are some of the things we need to keep in mind when we're evaluating these studies?
Well, one key thing to remember is that the effects they've seen have often been relatively modest. And we need more research to confirm these findings and really figure out the long-term effects of rhodiola on cognitive function.
So not a guaranteed brain power booster, but definitely something worth watching. It sounds like there's still so much we don't know about how rhodiola works in the brain and how it might be best used to really support cognitive function.
Exactly. There's a need for larger, more rigorous studies to understand those nuances of rhodiola's effects, in different aspects of cognition, and also to figure out the optimal dosages and long-term safety.
Well, I think we've reached the end of our rhodiola journey, and it's been fascinating. We've uncovered some really interesting information, but I think the biggest takeaway for me is just how much we still don't know.
I agree. Rhodiola has such a rich history, and there's growing research suggesting it has potential, but so many questions remain.
So what does this all mean for you, our listener? What factors might influence your decision to try rhodiola or not? Is it about the potential benefits, the lack of conclusive evidence, the safety considerations, cultural influences, or maybe something else entirely?
That's a question you have to answer for yourself. But hopefully this deep dive has given you the knowledge and tools to make a more informed decision.
Absolutely. And remember, this is just the start of your exploration. Keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep diving deep. You never know what fascinating discoveries are out there waiting to be found. Thanks for joining us on this rhodiola adventure.